Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever it is, wherever you are. My name is Andrew Grossett and welcome back to my channel. Before I get into this week's, same as always, if you have just joined this video series, please push the stop button, go back to week one and watch them all through, because it has been recorded in a sequence and therefore will make much better sense and have much greater impact on you and for you if you watch it as it was intended. So we've talked about getting your head and your heart and your property right for sale. We talked about the pros, cons and ways to go about selecting an agent to actually move your property forward and get it onto market, and hopefully that agent is now working so hard for you, driving things forward, getting those leads moving on, and they've got viewings going on, and it's got to a point where he or she has actually got an offer on the table now, and we're now moving into negotiations. Now, what I would say to yourself at this point in time is, don't be sensitive about the figure, especially an initial figure that gets put over to you. People are playing a game when it comes to sales. It is nothing other than a big game of chess, and therefore people will put offers in order to preserve their position, to therefore then be able to negotiate moving forward. So don't take any number that gets put on the table as particularly offensive or personal in the slightest. Obviously, your agent will be doing the best that they can in order to advise you throughout this process. And sometimes, and I'll put this in here now, sometimes the impression that we have on how much our property is worth is far away from what the market is prepared to pay for it. Now, this is why I put this bit in the beginning with regards to removing your emotions away from the sale of your property. Obviously, your property is your property. What you've lived through in that property, what you've been through in that property, what you've achieved in that property, none of those memories are going away. No, they are what they are, and they're exceptionally valuable and special to you. But just remember the to you part. The person that's stepping into this is making a offer based on their personal circumstances, where they feel the market is at the moment, and also their finances. None of those things have an impact on your memories, but in the same vein, your memories can't have an impact on those things. You might take a look at an offer that you've got in, compare it to the number that you decided. Remember, we talked about this in week one, a number that you've figured out is your sort of lowest point, and therefore want to turn an offer down because it doesn't match up to that figure. That's fine. But what I would urge you to do is, if you are a considerable way into the sales process and you've received a few offers in, and those few offers are all in and around the same ballpark, you might need to start readdressing things and readdressing the plan moving forward. Because, as I said earlier on, sometimes what we want for our property and what the market is prepared to pay for it at that particular period in time, it differs. And when that does, you've got a decision to make. No one's saying that you have to go ahead and sell your property, but remember, that's what we're here for. We're in this process to sell a property, and that means striking a deal. And for you at that point in time, obviously the aim of the game is always to achieve a number that works best for you. But sometimes the number that's the best number that can be created or achieved at that time, might be slightly different than what you ultimately decided you wanted for in the beginning of this process, and therefore you might need to accept the fact that a change in your planning, a change in your perspective, a change in where you're going might actually be required here. So we're at the stage where offers are being made, and whilst the offer level is something for you to consider, how much money they're willing to pay for your property, the type of buyer actually also plays a part in that decision making as to what offer that you go ahead with. So there are two types of buyers out here. You've got those that require a mortgage and those that don't. In other words, cash buyers. Now, the two ultimately end up the same, as in someone purchasing your property. But the path moving forward for them is very, very different. So someone that's purchasing the property with a mortgage will have to go through an application for that finance through their lender. Their lender will have to instruct a surveyor to come out to make sure that the property price that they are paying weighs up with what's comparable in the area for that type of property and that type of size, with that type of, whether it's a leasehold, freehold, etc., etc. So surveyor will go in and basically validate that process. They'll come back to the lender's then got to send it off to the underwriters, and then the mortgage offer gets issued. If it's a cash buyer, none of that applies. None of that applies. And so even just from my describing that, you can understand how much you can shorten the process of purchasing your property if you have a cash buyer. When you're making a decision between a cash buyer and someone that's got a mortgage, obviously, yes, the cash buyer is going to be faster because they haven't got all of that process to go through in order to access the finance to actually complete the transaction. But still do take a look at all offers that are on the table and assess them based on your needs and what you actually require. Yes, a cash buyer might be able to close the deal considerably faster from that of someone of a mortgage, but don't forget, they're going to expect something in return of that, and therefore the deal position that they're willing to give to you might be considerably lower than that of the person that's going for the mortgage. And sometimes, even in the respect of where you've got a cash buyer that's down here, but you've got a mortgage buyer that's all the way up here, you might end up still going with the mortgage person dependent on your circumstances. And this is what I want you to really pay attention to, is this is all about you right the way throughout this process. You have to be very aware of what your needs are and what your wants are, and make sure that when you're making decisions that they're not overly swayed by what's going on in that negotiation stage at that time, and that they are always reflective back on what your needs are and your plans are moving forward. And so with that in mind, I do have to remind you, look, no deal is still always an option. The whole point of coming to a deal is coming to a deal where it's agreeable terms on all respects. And just because someone has come along with a cash offer and they want to move quickly and this, that, and the other, you've got to make sure that this deal works for you in terms of the price, the terms, and the term. You know, as in how quickly this is going to get done. If you've got an ongoing purchase to make, you want to make sure that the deal that you're agreeing allows you to be able to move forward in the fashion that you find comfortable. That brings us to the end of this week. Well, yes, anyway, thank you so much for watching. Next week we're moving on to conveyancing and surveyors. Big subjects, big people, but we're moving forward. That's me out for this week. You guys be safe, and I'll see you in the forwards.